The night smelled of death and rain. Lucian Ravencroft knelt in the mud, cradling what remained of his world. Blood pooled beneath them, black in the moonlight, spreading like ink across ancient stones. Isabel's breath came in shallow gasps, each one weaker than the last. "Promise me," she whispered. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the cradle where her infant daughter lay screaming. "Promise me you'll protect her. Break this cycle of death." Lucian pressed his forehead to hers, cold marble skin against dying warmth. "I swear it. On my eternal soul, I swear it. Don't let the darkness consume you." Her eyes found his one final time, still kind, still believing a monster could be something more. "Remember what it means to be human." Then she was gone. The baby's cries echoed through Ravencroft Manor like accusations. Lucian held Isabel's body until dawn threatened the horizon, until servants came to take her away. Until all that remained was an empty cradle and a promise carved into his immortal bones. He'd failed her, failed to see the hunters coming, failed to protect the woman who'd looked at him without fear. But her daughter lived. Elizabeth. The bloodline continued. That would have to be enough. For 200 years, it had to be enough. The auction hall reeked of old money and older sins. Seraphina Ashford stood on the platform, holding her daughter against her chest like a shield. The auctioneer's voice echoed off stone walls that had witnessed 3 centuries of transactions. The Ashford widow and her infant, sold to settle Lord Ashford's gambling debts. Opening bid, 500 sovereigns. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. Her late husband had been dead only 3 months, buried in the family crypt with lies about honor still fresh on his headstone. Now his creditors wanted flesh for coin. The room stirred, hands raised. Numbers climbed like a gallows being built one plank at a time. 500, 600, 800. Seraphina stared at the floor, at ancient stones worn smooth by centuries of feet. This hall had been here longer than the kingdom itself, built when dark things still walked openly through the world. Now it hosted a different kind of darkness. 3,000 sovereigns, the voice came from the gallery above, deep, controlled. Each word precisely measured, like a man who'd learned to choose his battles carefully over a very long time. Seraphina looked up. A figure stood in shadow where even candlelight seemed reluctant to reach. Tall, unmoving, she could make out only the suggestion of height, the glint of something pale that might have been a hand resting on the balcony rail. 3,000, the auctioneer repeated, his voice unsteady now, uncertain. 4,000. A wine-emboldened merchant near the front puffing his chest like a rooster. The figure in the gallery didn't move, didn't raise his voice. Yet when he spoke again, every soul in that chamber felt winter crawl down their spine. 10,000 sovereigns, and any man who bids against me answers to me personally. The merchant paled. Several people near him edged away as if distance might offer protection from whatever presence watched from above. The brothel madam's smile vanished. Even the auctioneer seemed to shrink. "Sold," he whispered. Seraphina waited in a side chamber while papers were signed. Gold was counted, ownership transferred. Rose had fallen asleep against her shoulder, small fist curled in her mother's hair. She'd braided it that morning with ribbons, a futile gesture of dignity before walking into her own sale. The door opened without sound. He was tall, she noticed first. Tall and carved from moonlight and winter storms. His coat was black velvet, perfectly tailored, decades out of fashion, yet somehow more elegant for it. Dark hair fell past his collar, and his face. Seraphina's breath stopped. Beautiful, terrifying, ageless. His eyes met hers, gray as storm clouds, ancient as stone. For a moment she forgot how to breathe, forgot the weight of her daughter in her arms, forgot everything except those eyes that had seen empires rise and crumble. "I am Lord Lucian Ravencroft," he said. His voice was soft, controlled, each word carved from ice. You are now under my protection. Under his protection, not his property. The distinction settled between them like a contract. I understand, Seraphina whispered, though she understood nothing. His gaze dropped to Rose, who stirred in her sleep. Something shifted in his expression. Too quick to name, too deep to dismiss. The child is yours? Yes, my lord. What is her name? Rosalind. We call her Rose. He was silent for a long moment. Then he extended one pale hand toward the sleeping infant. His fingers hovered just above Rose's dark curls, close enough to sense her warmth, but careful not to touch. She will want for nothing, he said quietly. This I vow. Seraphina felt tears burn behind her eyes. But she'd cried enough these past months. For her husband's debts, for her father's abandoned estate, for the slow starvation that had driven her to this night. No more tears, only survival. Thank you, my lord. Lucian's hand withdrew. He turned toward the door, movements like liquid grace, predatory precision. A carriage waits. We leave within the hour. Where are we going? He paused, his profile sharp against candlelight. Ravencroft Manor, my ancestral home. His voice dropped lower, almost to himself, where such arrangements are understood. The carriage rolled through darkness beneath a blood-red moon. Seraphina adjusted Rose in her arms and studied the man across from her. Lord Lucian Ravencroft sat absolutely still, hands resting on his knees, gaze fixed on something beyond the window. He didn't breathe. She'd been watching for 5 minutes now, no rise and fall of chest, no visible pulse at his throat. The moonlight caught his profile, and she saw it clearly. Sharp cheekbones, elegant nose, lips pressed into a thin line as if holding back words that should never be spoken. My lord, she ventured softly, what will you require of me? His eyes shifted to her then, and she saw something in their depths that made her heart stutter. Not cruelty, not desire, something far more dangerous. Hunger, ancient and terrible, and held on the thinnest leash. Only what you are willing to give, he said at last. I did not purchase you for the usual reasons. Then why? Because no child should watch her mother be sold like cattle. His jaw tightened. Because I remember what it is to lose everything. The carriage rolled on. Seraphina held her daughter close and studied the vampire lord across from her. For that was what he must be, she realized with crystalline clarity. The stillness, the cold, the way shadows clung to him like old friends. You said you would be both father and husband, she whispered, remembering his words at the auction. Lucian smiled then, a terrible, beautiful expression that held centuries of sorrow. Yes, he said simply, if you will let me. Ravencroft Manor rose from the moorland like a monument to forgotten darkness. Seraphina pressed her face to the carriage window as they approached. The mansion sprawled across the hilltop, gray stone and black iron, Gothic spires piercing the night sky. Windows like empty eyes watching their approach, yet lights burned in several windows. Someone maintained this place despite its air of beautiful decay. The carriage stopped before massive oak doors carved with symbols Seraphina didn't recognize. Lucian descended first and offered his hand to help her down. His skin was cold, not merely cool but winter cold, marble cold, as if no blood flowed beneath that pale surface. But she accepted his assistance, careful not to jostle Rose. Welcome to Ravencroft, he said quietly. The doors opened. A woman stood framed in golden lamplight, middle-aged, silver-haired, dressed in a housekeeper's black with a ring of keys at her waist. Her eyes were kind but knowing. Mrs. Thorne, Lucian said, this is Mrs. Seraphina Ashford and her daughter Rosalind. They will be residing in the Rose Wing. Please see that rooms are prepared immediately. Of course, my lord. Mrs. Thorne's gaze swept over Seraphina with quick assessment, then softened. Come, dear, you look exhausted. Let's get you and the little one settled. Seraphina glanced at Lucian, uncertain. Go, he said. We will speak tomorrow evening. For now, you need rest. Tomorrow evening, not morning. The detail lodged in her mind like a thorn. The rose wing was unexpectedly beautiful. Mrs. Thorne led her through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced nobles, past rooms shrouded in dust covers, until they reached a suite overlooking the eastern gardens. Someone had aired out the chambers recently. The windows were clean. Fresh linens covered the four-poster bed. A fire crackled in the hearth. "The nursery connects through here," Mrs. Thorne said, opening a door to reveal a smaller room. Cradle, rocking chair, shelves waiting for toys. "His lordship had it prepared this afternoon." "This afternoon?" Seraphina frowned. "But the auction was only tonight. How did he—" "Lord Ravencroft is a man of considerable foresight." Mrs. Thorne's expression remained carefully neutral. "He's been attending those dreadful auctions for weeks, watching. When he saw you listed in the catalogue, he made certain arrangements." Watching. The word sent a chill down Seraphina's spine that wasn't entirely unpleasant. "What does he want from me?" she whispered. Mrs. Thorne was silent for a long moment, adjusting the cradle's blankets with practiced hands. "That's between you and his lordship, dear, but I will say this. I've served House Ravencroft for longer than you might believe. Lord Lucian is not cruel. He is not petty." She paused. "What he is? Ancient, lonely, and bound by oaths older than this kingdom." "Is he—" Seraphina hesitated. "Is he what I think he is?" "If you think him a vampire lord, then yes." Mrs. Thorne met her gaze directly. "But not the kind from Penny Dreadfuls. He doesn't hunt innocents. He's more like a guardian of forgotten things, a keeper of old laws." Seraphina sank into the rocking chair, Rose still sleeping in her arms. "Then why did he buy me? Buy us?" "Perhaps you should ask him yourself." Mrs. Thorne moved toward the door. "I'll have food sent up. You'll find night clothes in the wardrobe, and anything you need, simply ring. The bell cord is beside the bed." "Mrs. Thorne," Seraphina called as the housekeeper reached the threshold. "Does he really mean to be both father and husband?" The older woman's expression grew distant, almost sad. "His lordship makes no promises he doesn't intend to keep. But the keeping of such promises," she shook her head, "that will be the difficult part, for both of you." Seraphina couldn't sleep. She'd fed Rose, changed her, rocked her, until the baby drifted into deep slumber in the nursery cradle. She'd eaten the cold supper brought up, changed into the nightgown she found waiting, white cotton with lace at the collar and wrists. But sleep wouldn't come. Finally, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the balcony. The garden stretched below, wild and overgrown, threaded with stone paths that glowed silver in the moonlight. Beyond lay the moors, rolling darkness punctuated by distant lights from the village. Movement caught her eye. A figure walked the garden paths below, dark coat, pale skin, hair like ink in the moonlight. Lord Lucian moved through his estate like a ghost, hands clasped behind his back, head slightly bowed as if bearing the weight of invisible chains. He stopped beneath an ancient oak, its branches twisted by centuries of wind. Even from this distance, Seraphina could see the tension in his shoulders, the terrible stillness that marked him as something other than human. He looked up. Their eyes met across the darkness. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Lucian inclined his head, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and continued his solitary walk, disappearing into the shadows beyond the garden wall. Seraphina's hands tightened on the balcony rail. Her heart beat too fast. Her breath came too quick. This was madness. She'd been bought by a vampire lord who claimed he would be both father to her child and husband to her, who walked his gardens at midnight like a condemned man pacing his cell. What have I agreed to? But even as the question formed, she knew the answer. She'd agreed to survival, to protection, to a chance for Rose to grow up safe and fed and warm. What Lord Lucian Ravencroft wanted in return remained a mystery wrapped in shadow and old promises. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Seraphina returned inside, checking on Rose one final time before climbing into the impossibly soft bed. As she drifted toward uneasy sleep, she could have sworn she heard footsteps in the corridor outside her door. Slow, measured, pausing just long enough for someone to listen, then continuing on into the darkness of Ravencroft's endless halls. Seraphina woke to gray morning light and the sound of Rose cooing. She found herself thinking of the vampire lord who walked his gardens at midnight, who'd spent 10,000 sovereigns to save a woman and child from fates worse than death, who'd made a promise 200 years ago and had been searching ever since for a way to keep it. She dressed and went to the nursery window. Below, the gardens looked different in daylight, less wild, more carefully tended than she'd realized. Someone had maintained these grounds with love, even if they'd grown untamed with time. And standing in the shadow of the manor's western wing, barely visible, was a portrait hung in a corridor window. A woman, dark-haired, holding an infant. The resemblance to her own reflection was unmistakable. Seraphina's breath caught. That must be Isabel. And somehow, impossibly, Seraphina knew her story wasn't beginning. It was continuing. 3 weeks passed like a slow thaw after centuries of winter. Seraphina woke each morning to gray light filtering through rose-wing windows, to the sound of her daughter babbling in the nursery, to the strange peace of being safe for the first time in months. She learned the rhythms of Ravencroft Manor, Mrs. Thorne's brisk efficiency as she managed servants who appeared and disappeared like ghosts, the gardener who tended only night-blooming flowers, the village donors who came at dusk with scarves wrapped around their necks, leaving with gold coins and expressions of relief rather than fear. And she learned about Lucian himself, in fragments, in glimpses, in the careful distance he maintained like a man handling something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. He never came to her rooms during daylight. Those hours belonged to silence and closed chambers in the manor's western wing. But as sunset painted the sky crimson, she would hear his footsteps in the corridor, the whisper of his coat as he moved through the house like wind through empty halls. He came to the nursery each evening before dinner, stood in the doorway watching Rose play with wooden blocks. The baby would shriek with delight when she saw him, reaching with chubby hands toward the pale man who knelt to make shadows dance across the nursery walls, wolves, ravens, dragons breathing silent fire. Rose laughed, grabbed his fingers, tugged his hair with complete confidence that he would never hurt her. "She has no sense of self-preservation," Lucian observed one evening, his voice carrying something that might have been wonder. "She knows you wouldn't hurt her," Seraphina replied from the rocking chair. His expression darkened. Perhaps she shouldn't be so certain. But he continued coming, spending that hour before dinner simply being near the child, as if her innocent presence soothed something broken in him that had been shattered for far too long. The library became their evening sanctuary, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with volumes in a dozen languages. Lucian would pour wine for her, though he never drank, never ate. She'd caught him once watching her consume dinner with an expression that seemed almost nostalgic, almost grieving. "You miss it," she'd said, "being human, eating, drinking, every day." His fingers traced the stem of an empty wine glass. "Though I barely remember the taste of bread, whether apples were truly sweet or if memory makes them so." He looked at her then, really looked. "Some days I remember too well. Other days, I wonder if I was ever human at all." They talked through those long evenings, about the estate's history, about Rose's needs, about Seraphina's interests before her late husband's gambling had destroyed everything. She learned that Lucian had been a scholar before his turning, that he spoke 7 languages, that he'd known Shakespeare and attended the first performance of Hamlet. "It was quite good," he said dryly, though Will tended toward melodrama. Seraphina laughed, surprising herself. When had she last laughed? Lucian smiled then, really smiled, and the expression made him look younger, almost human, almost like the man he must have been 389 years ago. "You have a lovely laugh," he said quietly. "I hope to hear it more often." The moment stretched between them, warm and dangerous. She found herself noticing small things. The way candlelight caught his profile, how his hands moved with unconscious grace when he turned pages, the rare moments when he forgot to maintain that careful control, and she glimpsed the man beneath the monster, the loneliness, the weight of centuries, the desperate hope that maybe, this time, he might be allowed to keep something beautiful. One evening, she found the portrait herself, wandering corridors while Rose napped. A door left slightly ajar behind a bookshelf, as if someone had forgotten to close it fully. The room beyond was small, private, a study perhaps, or a sanctuary. Dust motes danced in moonlight from a narrow window, and on the wall hung the portrait, a woman young and lovely with dark curls and gentle eyes. She wore a gown from the previous century and held a baby in her arms, an infant with the same dark curls, the same delicate features. The resemblance wasn't exact, but it was undeniable. "You shouldn't be here," Serafina spun. Lucian stood in the doorway, his expression carefully blank, but his eyes betrayed something like pain. "Who is she?" Serafina whispered. "No one." He moved to close the door, to guide her out. "Lucian, please." She caught his arm. "You said I remind you of her. Who was she?" For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his shoulders sagged, centuries of grief settling visibly on him. "Her name was Isabel." His voice was raw. "She was a widow, newly impoverished with an infant daughter. I found her at an auction much like the one where I found you." He paused. The year was 1623. Serafina's heart clenched. "You bought her?" "Yes, I brought her here, promised her protection, promised to be both father to her child and husband to her." His laugh was bitter. "The same words I spoke to you, history repeating itself like a curse." "What happened?" Lucian moved to stand before the portrait, his back to Serafina. "I fell in love with her, completely, devastatingly, against every oath I'd sworn to keep my distance." He paused. "And she loved me in return. God help her." "That doesn't sound like a tragedy." It was. He turned and she saw the full weight of his guilt. "Because when vampire hunters came to Ravencroft, drawn by rumors of my existence, Isabel tried to protect me. She stood between me and their holy weapons." His hands clenched. "And she died for it, her and the baby both, gone before I could save them." Tears burned Serafina's eyes. "Lucian, do you understand now?" He stepped closer. "Why I keep my distance, why I will not allow myself to love you, no matter how much you remind me of her? I am death, Serafina. Death and cold and eternal hunger. Everyone I love dies." "That's not true." "It is." His voice cracked. "Isabel is in the crypt downstairs, along with her daughter Elizabeth, along with 3 other mortals I dared to care for over the centuries, all dead, all because of me." Serafina reached up, cupping his cold face in her warm hands. "Then why did you buy me? Why bring me here, if you knew?" "Because I'm selfish." His eyes closed. "Because when I saw you at that auction, holding Rose just as Isabel held Elizabeth, I couldn't walk away. I told myself it would be different this time, that I could protect you without loving you." He laughed bitterly. "I was wrong. I was wrong the moment you laughed at dinner, the moment Rose grabbed my finger, the moment I realized—" He stopped. "Realized what?" "That you might be Isabel's descendant, that her bloodline continued." The revelation struck like lightning. "What?" "Your maiden name, Blackwood. Isabel's daughter survived the attack. I managed to save Elizabeth at least. I placed her with a family named Blackwood, watched over her line for generations. Then I lost track decades ago, assumed the bloodline had ended." He opened his eyes and they burned with intensity. "But it hadn't. You carry her blood. That's why you call to me so strongly." The dinner was meant to celebrate 4 weeks since the auction. 4 weeks of peaceful domesticity. 4 weeks of carefully maintained distance between a vampire lord and the woman living under his protection. Mrs. Thorne had helped Serafina dress in a dinner gown of deep burgundy. styled her hair in an elegant chignon. She felt almost like herself again. Not the desperate widow from the auction block, but the woman she'd been before grief and poverty had hollowed her out. Rose slept upstairs with a young maid assigned as nursemaid, a girl named Anne with gentle hands and a soft voice. Lucian stood when Serafina entered the dining room. He'd changed into formal evening wear, black coat, silver waistcoat, white cravat. He looked like he'd stepped from one of the portraits downstairs, timeless and impossibly refined. "You look well," he said quietly, holding her chair. "Thank you." He didn't sit at the head of the table, but across from her, close enough for conversation. Servants brought courses in silence, roasted pheasant, vegetables in cream sauce, fresh bread that smelled like heaven. Serafina ate hungrily. Lucian had wine poured for her, but took nothing himself, simply watched with that expression she couldn't decipher. They talked through the meal, about a poetry book he'd lent her, about Rose's progress, about village matters. She found herself relaxing. The moment felt almost normal. She reached for her wine glass, misjudged the distance, the glass tipped, red wine spilled across white tablecloth, across her plate, across the knife. "Oh!" She grabbed the blade to move it aside, forgetting its sharpness. Pain flared across her palm. The knife bit deep. Blood welled immediately, crimson against pale skin, and everything changed. Lucian was on his feet in an instant, but he didn't move closer. He stood frozen, hands clenched at his sides, every muscle rigid. His eyes had darkened to storm cloud gray, fixed on her bleeding palm with an intensity that made her breath catch. She saw it then, the fight happening beneath his controlled surface, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands trembled infinitesimally, ancient hunger warring with iron will. Lucian! She'd never used his given name before. It slipped out natural as breathing. "Don't move." His voice was raw, strained. "Don't move." Mrs. Thorne bustled in with cloths, started toward Serafina. "Leave us." Lucian's voice cracked like a whip. "Now." The housekeeper hesitated, then withdrew quickly, closing the door behind her. Serafina stood slowly, cradling her bleeding hand. Blood dripped onto the floor. Tap, 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 each drop like thunder in the silent room. "I should go," she whispered. "No." He closed his eyes, breathing deeply through his nose. "This is my home. You will not flee because of my nature." When he opened his eyes again, they were clearer, more controlled, but she could still see the struggle beneath. "Come here." It should have been a command to fear. Instead, Serafina found herself moving closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Lucian pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, reached for her hand with movements that were careful, reverent, as if she might shatter. His fingers were cold but gentle as he wrapped the cloth around her palm, applied pressure to stop the bleeding. His touch was so careful, so tender. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't mean to frighten you." "You didn't." She watched his face. "You controlled it." "Barely." He finished binding her hand but didn't release it. His thumb traced her wrist where her pulse fluttered. "Your blood calls to me, Serafina. It sings like nothing I've heard in centuries." She felt the weight of that confession settle between them. "I don't understand." "Some mortals have blood that resonates with certain vampires." His grip on her wrist tightened slightly, not painful, but firm, grounding. "A compatibility, a calling. It's rare." He looked up, met her eyes. "I felt it only once before, 200 years ago, with Isabel." The door opened. Mrs. Thorne stood in the threshold, expression grave. "His lordship's guests have arrived. They await in the entrance hall." Lucian went absolutely still. "What guests?" "The Vampire Council, my lord. Lord Cornelius, Lady Helena, and the Arbiter." The color, what little remained, drained from Lucian's face. "Get Serafina to her rooms. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me." He turned to Serafina, his eyes carrying something that looked like fear. "Please, trust me." They waited in the great hall like three birds of prey. Lucian entered to find them arranged before the cold fireplace. Lord Cornelius in crimson velvet, ancient and angular. Lady Helena in midnight silk, silver hair cascading past her shoulders, and the Arbiter. The Arbiter wore simple black, carried no visible weapons, but his presence made the air taste of ash and sanctified steel. "Lord Ravenscroft," Cornelius said, voice dripping false courtesy, "how kind of you to receive us at such a late hour. You gave me little choice." Lucian remained standing. "State your business." "Your business, you mean?" Lady Helena's voice was silk over iron. "We've heard disturbing reports. A young widow purchased at auction, a child in residence." Her eyes found his. "And the widow bears a striking resemblance to Isabel Ashford, your lost love from 1623. My household is no concern of yours. It is when you violate the mourning law." Cornelius stepped forward. "You know the rules, Ravenscroft. No vampire may take a blood descendant of their former beloved as ward, wife, or bonded companion." "I haven't bonded with her?" "Not yet." The Arbiter spoke, voice like gravel. "But you want to. We can smell her blood on you. The resonance, the call." Lucian's hands clenched. "I have controlled myself for 389 years. Your restraint ended when you brought her here." Lady Helena produced a document. "We have the genealogy. Seraphina Ashford, maiden name Blackwood, is Isabel's great-great-great-granddaughter through Elizabeth's line." She set the document on a table between them. "You've been protecting that bloodline for centuries, and when you saw her at that auction, you couldn't resist." Cornelius smiled. "Predatory. You brought her to the same rooms Isabel occupied, made the same promise. I'm protecting an innocent woman and child. You're indulging a dangerous fantasy." Lady Helena's voice softened. "We understand grief, Lucian, but the mourning law exists because vampires who pursue their beloved's descendants inevitably destroy them. I'm not—" "You are." The Arbiter moved closer. "I've seen this pattern 100 times. The rescue, the promises, it always ends the same. Forced turning, blood madness, or death." Lucian felt cold dread settle in his chest. "The Council's judgment is this." Cornelius's voice carried the weight of law. "You have two choices. First, Seraphina Ashford and her child leave Ravenscroft tonight. We will place them with a suitable mortal family. You break all ties. No. Second choice." Cornelius smiled. "We execute the mourning law's prescribed punishment. You are exiled, your estate seized, and the bloodline is ended permanently." Horror crashed through Lucian. "You would kill a woman and infant for my crime?" "The law is clear. They're innocent. So was Isabel." Lady Helena's expression held genuine regret. "The law exists for a reason." The Arbiter spoke quietly. "Make your choice, Lord Ravenscroft. By dawn." Seraphina was pacing when Lucian found her. Rose slept peacefully in the nursery. "What did they say?" She turned, searching his face. "They want you gone." His voice was hollow. "Or dead." He explained everything, the mourning law, the Council's ultimatum. Seraphina listened, growing paler with each word. "So if I stay, they kill me and Rose?" "Yes." Lucian couldn't meet her eyes. "If you leave tonight, they'll ensure you're comfortable, protected." "And if I don't want to leave?" "Don't." The word came out harsh. "The Council is right. I saw Isabel in you from the first moment. How can you trust that what I feel is real?" Seraphina crossed to him, took his cold hands in her warm ones. "Because I know the difference." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You see me, Lucian, the real me. When you watch me laugh, when you listen to me talk, you're not seeing her. You're seeing me." "Seraphina, I'm not leaving. Not unless you look me in the eye and tell me you don't love me. Not Isabel's memory. Me." Lucian stared at her. 389 years of careful control crumbling. "I can't," he whispered. "Then we fight." "There may be a way." The words came slowly. "Dangerous, but possible. Tell me." And he did. The covenant bond, equal partnership, mutual blood exchange, witnessed by someone the council respected. You would drink from me, just a few drops, enough to create a true tie. You wouldn't become vampire, but you would be changed, stronger, longer-lived, 2 or 3 centuries, and we would be connected. And the risk? You could die in the process. Serafina didn't hesitate. Who would witness? A knock at the door. Mrs. Thorne entered. But something had changed. Her presence felt different, older, more powerful. I will, the housekeeper said quietly. And before Serafina's eyes, Mrs. Thorne transformed. Not physically, but the weight of centuries settled over her like a cloak. I'm not merely a housekeeper. I'm a daywalker, a vampire so ancient I can withstand sunlight. I've served House Ravencroft for 300 years. She looked at Lucian. And I had a covenant bond with your great-grandfather. It lasted until his death from old age at 173 years. Serafina's breath caught. You loved him. I did. We had 140 years together. Mrs. Thorne's voice carried the weight of that loss. If you choose this path, I will witness. I will stake my existence on this bond's authenticity. Lucian stared at his housekeeper. You would risk that? I would give you the same chance at happiness. Serafina looked between them. When? She asked simply. Lucian's expression broke open. Relief, terror, hope. Tonight. The chamber beneath the crypt was older than memory, carved into bedrock by hands that predated history. Candles formed a circle. Smoke filled the air, herbs that smelled of autumn and ash and ancient promises. Mrs. Thorne wore ceremonial robes. She spoke in a language Serafina didn't recognize, something old and powerful. The candles flared. The smoke coalesced into shapes that almost looked like watching figures. Lucian Ravencroft, do you offer your blood freely? I do. Serafina Ashford, do you offer your blood freely? I do. Then seal the covenant. Lucian drew a blade across his palm. Dark blood welled. He let it drip into a silver chalice, then extended the blade to Serafina. She didn't hesitate. Her blood joined his in the cup. The two bloods swirled together, mixing into something that seemed to glow. Drink, Mrs. Thorne commanded. Lucian raised the chalice. Never breaking eye contact with Serafina, he drank deeply. She saw his eyes darken, saw the bond begin to form. Then he offered her the chalice. Serafina's hands trembled as she accepted it. The mixed blood smelled of copper and something ancient. She drank. The world exploded. She felt everything. Lucian's hunger, his love, his fear. 389 years of memories crashed through her mind. She tasted his first kill, felt his horror, lived through decades of loneliness. She felt his love for Isabel, pure and tragic. And underneath, she felt his love for her, different, deeper, based not on resemblance, but on who she was. Pain lanced through her veins, fire and ice and electricity. But Lucian was there, catching her as she fell. I've got you, he murmured. Just hold on. And Serafina held on, feeling the bond settle into place like a key turning in a lock. She felt him, his relief, his joy, his devotion. Then darkness rose up and she fell into it knowing she was safe. The last thing she heard was Lucian's voice. Don't leave me, not again. Then nothing but darkness and the golden thread tying her to him across death itself. Serafina woke to a world made new. Sunlight streamed through rose-wing windows. She could see each individual dust mote dancing, could count the threads in the curtains, could hear misses. Thorne humming 3 rooms away, the melody crystalline and perfect. She tried to sit up and gasped. Everything was sharper, more vivid, colors bleeding at the edges of her vision. She could smell bread baking 2 floors down, could hear the gardener working in the eastern grounds. And beneath it all, like a second heartbeat, she felt him, Lucian, sleeping somewhere deep in the manor. She sensed his dreams, felt his awareness of her even in slumber, a constant presence like a warm hand pressed to her shoulder. The bond. The door opened. Mrs. Thorne entered with a breakfast tray. "Easy now," she said. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. The transformation takes time." 2 days. Panic flooded through her. "Rose is perfectly fine. I've been caring for her. She's in the nursery now." A smile. "I think she's been sensing his lordship through your bond. Even infants can feel it sometimes." Seraphina pressed a hand to her chest. Feeling the golden thread pulse with each heartbeat, she could sense Lucian's relief flooding through the connection. "Did it work?" she asked. "The covenant?" "Better than expected. His lordship sat vigil with you the entire first night, until sunrise forced him to his chambers." Mrs. Thorne poured tea. "I've never seen him so afraid." Warmth flooded through Seraphina. Her emotion or his? The bond made it hard to tell. "The council," she said. "They're coming back." Mrs. Thorne's expression grew serious. "They returned last night. Lord Ravenscroft is meeting with them now. They'll want to see you soon." Seraphina pushed back the covers. "Then I need to dress." The great hall felt different this time. Seraphina stood beside Lucian as an equal. She wore a gown of deep blue, her hair dressed simply. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's pride, his fierce protectiveness. Lord Cornelius studied them with cold eyes. Lady Helena's expression was more thoughtful. The arbiter stood watching with ancient patience. "You bonded with her after our explicit warning," Cornelius said. "I bonded with her before your formal judgment was issued," Lucian corrected. His hand found Seraphina's. "The mourning law prohibits bonds formed after the council's ruling. We preceded your judgment by ours." "A technicality, a covenant bond, witnessed and sealed." Mrs. Thorne stepped forward. "I, Margaret Thorne, day walker of the Southern Territories, testify that this bond was freely given by both parties." Lady Helena leaned forward. "How do you feel, child?" Seraphina met her gaze steadily. "Strong, clear, myself, but more." "Do you feel compelled to obey Lord Ravenscroft?" "No." Seraphina squeezed Lucian's hand. "I feel connected, like we're two halves of a whole, but each half is complete on its own. I can feel his emotions when he shares them, but my mind is my own. My choices are my own." The arbiter moved closer, studying them both. "You understand what you've done? You'll outlive your daughter, your grandchildren. 200 years of loss." "I know." Seraphina lifted her chin. "And I chose it freely, because I love him, not because he saved me. I love him as he is, a man who's kept promises for 200 years, a man who fights every day to be honorable." She turned to the council. "This world needs more people willing to choose love over fear, even if the cost is high." The arbiter stopped. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Lady Helena spoke softly. "I vote to accept the covenant bond as legitimate." The arbiter nodded. "I concur. The bond was properly sealed. The woman shows no signs of thrall." He glanced at Lucian. "You've found an equal, not a replacement." Only Cornelius remained opposed, jaw clenched. "Fine," he spat. "The bond stands, but we will be watching. One mistake, Ravenscroft." Lucian inclined his head. "Understood. You have my word. I will protect her, cherish her, and love her for exactly who she is." The council departed. When the hall was finally empty, Lucian pulled Seraphina into his arms. He buried his face in her hair, trembling with relief. Through the bond she felt everything. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When you collapsed." "I'm here." She held him tight. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He laughed, actually laughed, broken and genuine and full of hope. "Come," he said. "There's someone who's been asking for her mother." They found Rose in the nursery, playing with blocks. The baby looked up when they entered and shrieked with delight. "Mama!" Seraphina scooped up her daughter, feeling Rose's warmth and weight and trust. Rose reached for Lucian. "Papa!" Rose babbled, clear as crystal. Lucian froze, his expression breaking open with wonder, with something that looked like pain and joy twisted together. He took Rose carefully. cradled her against his chest. And through the bond, Seraphina felt his heart, still and cold as it was, somehow beat for the first time in centuries. "Yes," Lucian whispered, "I'm here, little one." And in that moment, surrounded by afternoon sunlight and Rose's laughter, they were simply a family. Unconventional, impossible, but theirs. 6 months passed in careful peace. Seraphina learned to navigate her enhanced senses, to use the bond to communicate wordlessly with Lucian across the estate. She could think a question and feel his answer like warm breath against her mind. Rose grew and thrived, taking her first stumbling steps between Lucian's hands and Seraphina's arms. She was fearless, calling Lucian Papa with complete confidence. They discussed estate matters during long evenings, how to expand Ravencroft's reputation as a haven for covenant-bonded pairs, how to protect that knowledge from those who would exploit it. The future felt solid, real, something they were building together. One careful day at a time, romance bloomed slowly, carefully. The first kiss came one evening after the council's acceptance, tentative at first, then deeper. Cold lips meeting warm, the bond between them glowing gold in the darkness. "I have 200 years with you," Seraphina said one night. "That's more than most people get in one lifetime." Lucian held her close. "Then I'll make every year matter, every day, every moment." And she knew he would. The attack came on a moonless night. Seraphina woke to Lucian's alarm screaming through the bond. Pure terror, pure rage, danger. She was moving before conscious thought, scooping Rose from her cradle, running for the safe room Lucian had shown her, hidden behind a bookshelf in the library. Iron-reinforced walls. Mrs. Thorne appeared, blood on her hands. "Go!" The daywalker shoved her toward the safe room. "Get Rose inside. Don't open for anyone but his lordship or me." "What about Lucian? He can handle himself. You're what they want." Through the bond, Seraphina felt Lucian fighting, felt his rage, his fear for her. She stumbled into the safe room, slammed the iron door, heard the locks engage, and through the bond she experienced everything. 6 hunters, rogue, not council sent, armed with holy water and blessed silver. "Where is she?" their leader demanded. Scarred, dead-eyed. The covenant-bonded woman, her blood's worth a fortune. Lucian moved like death. 2 hunters fell, throats torn, but there were too many. Holy water burned his skin. Silver bullets tore through his shoulder. Through the bond, Seraphina felt every wound. "I'm coming," she thought desperately. "Stay hidden." His mental voice was fierce. "They can't hurt me permanently. Stay in the safe room." She heard them coming. Heard tools against iron, the door beginning to give. Through the bond, Lucian roared, an inhuman sound that shook the manor's foundations. He tore through the remaining hunters with brutal efficiency, no longer holding back. This was the ancient predator, the creature who'd survived 389 years through sheer lethal will. But the leader was fast. As Lucian ripped the man away from the safe room door, the hunter drove a blessed silver stake through his chest. Through the bond, Seraphina felt the agony, felt the lethal wound, felt Lucian's consciousness beginning to flicker. The safe room door burst open. Mrs. Thorne stood there, blood splattered. "Come quickly." They found Lucian in the library, collapsed against a bookshelf, the silver stake protruding from his chest, his skin gray, his breathing shallow. Around him lay 6 bodies, all dead. "No." Seraphina fell to her knees beside him, Rose still in one arm. "Lucian, stay with me." His eyes opened, barely. "Did I protect you?" "Yes." Tears streamed down her face. "Now let me protect you." Mrs. Thorne knelt beside them. "The stake. We have to remove it. But he'll need blood immediately, or he'll die before he can heal. Take mine." Seraphina didn't hesitate. "It will bond you further. Make the connection absolute. You'll feel everything he experiences, every darkness. There's no going back." Seraphina met her eyes. "I don't care. Save him. Thorne gripped the stake. "This will hurt." She pulled. Lucian convulsed. Through the bond, Serafina felt every microsecond of agony, the tearing, the burning. She bit her lip until it bled, held him steady. "Now," Mrs. Thorne commanded. Serafina pressed her wrist to Lucian's mouth. "Drink." For a moment, nothing. Then instinct took over. His fangs pierced her skin, and he drank. The bond exploded. Serafina felt it intensify beyond anything she'd imagined, felt his desperation, his gratitude, his absolute devotion. 389 years of loneliness poured into her. She felt the wound begin to close, felt strength return to his limbs. When he finally pulled away, his color had returned. The wound was healing. "You saved me," he whispered. "We saved each other." She touched his face. "That's what family does." Rose reached for Lucian. "Papa." He took her carefully, cradling her against his chest, and something in his expression broke open. "Family," he repeated, voice cracking. "I have a family." Serafina leaned against him, exhausted and terrified and grateful. "Our family, strange and dark and absolutely ours." The days that followed were quiet, careful. Lucian healed slowly. The silver wound left a scar even vampire flesh couldn't fully erase, a permanent reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Serafina stayed close, their bond humming with constant reassurance. "We are safe, we are alive, we survived." Through the bond she experienced things she'd never imagined. Not just Lucian's emotions, but glimpses of his past. Fragments of memory bleeding through their connection. She saw him as a young scholar in 1437, saw the battlefield where he was turned, saw his horror at what he'd become. She saw Isabel, not as a threat or a ghost, but as Lucian had loved her. Beautiful, kind, tragically mortal, and she understood. She wasn't replacing Isabel. She was continuing what Isabel had started. The belief that even monsters deserved a chance at redemption. One evening, as Lucian read to Rose before bed, Serafina pulled Mrs. Thorne aside. "You loved his great-grandfather," she said. "What was it like, watching him age while you stayed frozen?" Mrs. Thorne's expression grew distant. "Painful, beautiful, worth every moment." She looked at Lucian with Rose. "You'll age more slowly than he did. The bond sustains you. But eventually, time will claim you, and Lucian will be left alone again." "How did you survive it, after he died?" "By remembering that love doesn't require forever to matter. It matters because we choose it, every day, for as long as we have." Serafina felt those words settle into her bones. The council sent investigators 3 weeks after the attack. They documented the rogue hunters, confirmed they'd been operating independently, selling Covenant bond secrets to wealthy collectors. Lord Cornelius arrived personally 4 weeks later. "You defended your family honorably, Ravencroft," he said, voice grudging but genuine. "The council recognizes this." He paused at the door. "We'll be recommending Covenant bonds as legitimate alternatives for vampires seeking mortal companionship. Your bond has changed centuries of precedent." After he left, Lucian turned to Serafina. "We did that. Together." "Together," she agreed. Lady Helena visited separately, more gentle than Cornelius. "There's something you should know," she said. "The council has been studying Covenant bonds. Children born after bonds are formed sometimes carry traces, enhanced resilience, longer lifespans." She looked at Rose. "She may live 150 years naturally, and if she chooses a Covenant bond when she's grown," Lucian's hand found Serafina's. Through the bond, she felt his wonder, his hope. "We'll let her choose," Serafina said firmly, "when the time comes." "As it should be," Helena agreed. "Choice, not curse. That's what you've proven." 5 years later, spring came to Ravencroft Manor like a benediction. Serafina stood in the garden, watching Rose chase butterflies through wildflowers that had been tamed into beauty. Her daughter was 5 now, bright, curious, fearless. She'd grown up knowing exactly what her papa was. And it bothered her not at all. "Higher, Papa, higher!" Lucian laughed, pushing the swing he'd installed beneath the ancient oak, his movements careful. But joy radiated from him. Through the bond, Seraphina felt it warm her from the inside out. She barely looked older than the day of the covenant ritual, perhaps 28, when she was actually 37. The bond sustained her, gave her enhanced strength that made her a true partner in managing the estate. Mrs. Thorne emerged carrying a tea tray. "How domestic we've become," she observed. "A vampire lord playing father, a covenant-bonded mortal playing lady of the manor." "Let the council look." Seraphina accepted a cup. "They accepted the bond. They can accept our happiness." "There's news. Lady Helena sent a message. She's invited you both to the Winter Council gathering. They want to make your covenant bond a case study. You've become celebrities in vampire circles." Through the bond, Seraphina felt Lucian's pride and vulnerability. "Let them talk," she thought at him. "We know the truth." His love washed over her like a wave. That evening, after Rose was tucked into bed with a story about brave knights and clever dragons, Seraphina found Lucian on the balcony. He stood watching the moon rise, that contemplative expression she'd learned to recognize. "You're thinking," she observed, "about how strange it is to be happy." His voice was quiet. "I'd forgotten what it felt like." He turned to her, cupped her face in his cold hands. "Do you regret it? The bond, the risk?" "Never." She covered his hands with hers. "I have you and Rose and 200 years to see what the world becomes. Even knowing what I am, you're the man who pushes my daughter on swings, who reads poetry at midnight, who works every day to be honorable." She kissed him softly. "You're not a monster, you're mine." His control fractured. He kissed her deeply, pulling her against him. Through the bond, she felt his need, his devotion. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. 200 years of this," he whispered, "of not being alone, of having a family." She had to ask, "What happens after, when I finally die?" Lucian was silent. Then he smiled, sad but genuine. "Then I'll carry you with me, not as a ghost to recreate, but as a memory to treasure. And I'll protect Rose's children, and theirs, the way I should have from the beginning. Love doesn't require forever to matter. It matters because we choose it, every day." The final portrait was completed on a crisp autumn evening. The artist stepped back from his canvas. "It's finished, Lord Ravencroft." Lucian stood with Seraphina and Rose before the painting. 5-year-old Rose fidgeted but smiled radiant. Seraphina looked elegant and timeless, and Lucian looked at peace. The portrait was hung in the gallery beside Isabel's. 2 eras, 2 loves, 2 families. Not replacement, continuation. That night, Lucian stood alone in the portrait gallery. Candlelight flickered across both paintings. "Isabel," he whispered softly. He touched her portrait's frame gently. "I kept my promise. Your bloodline thrives. Your great-great-great-granddaughter stands beside me, strong, free, choosing her own fate." His voice cracked. "And I found something I never thought possible. A second chance to be the man you believed I could be. Thank you for making me promise to protect what you loved, for giving me purpose that lasted 2 centuries. He turned to the new portrait. "I won't fail again. This time, I'll be the father Rose needs, the husband Seraphina deserves, the man you believed I could be." Footsteps behind him. Seraphina slipped her hand into his. "Keeping promises?" she asked gently. "Always." They stood together, past and present united. "Come to bed," Seraphina said. "Rose wants you to tell her a story tomorrow about the woman who made all this possible." Lucian looked at her. This mortal woman who'd chosen 200 years of darkness over one safe lifetime, who'd saved him when he'd spent centuries saving others. "What story should I tell?" "The truth." Seraphina smiled. "Her name was Isabel. She was brave and kind, and she believed a vampire could keep promises, could be honorable, could be a father. She squeezed his hand. Tell Rose that Isabel's greatest gift wasn't her bloodline. It was teaching you that love always keeps its promises, even 200 years later. Lucian pulled her close. Through the bond he showed her everything, his gratitude, his love, his certainty that this time he'd gotten it right. Later that night, after Rose had been tucked into bed, Mrs. Thorne approached them in the library. "There's something you should know," she said quietly, "about Rose. I've been observing her. She has traces of the bond in her blood, born after your covenant was sealed." She looked at Rose's door. "She may live 150 years naturally, enhanced resilience, sharper senses, and if she chooses a covenant bond when she's grown, she'll be even stronger than typical bonds." Lucian's hand found Seraphina's. Through the bond, she felt his wonder. "We'll let her choose," Seraphina said firmly, "when the time comes." "As it should be," Mrs. Thorne agreed. "Choice, not curse. That's what you've proven." The future stretched ahead, not just 200 years for Seraphina, but generations. A legacy built on choice, on love freely given, on promises kept across centuries. Together they walked from the gallery, past the portraits, past the ghosts, and the promises, and the weight of centuries, toward the rose wing where their daughter slept, toward 200 years of tomorrows, toward a future built on old vows, finally kept, and new love freely chosen. And in the portrait gallery, candlelight flickered across two paintings, two women, two babies, and one vampire lord who'd learned that redemption wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about honoring the past by protecting the future. One promise at a time, one choice at a time, one family at a time. In the darkness of Ravencroft Manor, three souls slept, one vampire, one covenant-bonded mortal, one child carrying traces of both worlds. And for the first time in 389 years, Lucian Ravencroft dreamed not of the past, but of the future. A future where his daughter would grow, where his wife would age slowly beside him, where the bloodline he'd sworn to protect would flourish for generations, where a promise made in blood and grief had been transformed into something beautiful, into a family, into home.